The tugboat, for its size, is the most powerful craft afloat, and Captain Star and his tugs are the power between the docks and the waterways that make up the big city port. This is TUGS. TUGS videos are available now from Castle Vision.
TUGS, coming to you this autumn on Castle Vision.
Home media, the wonderful world of inserting DVDs or VHS tapes into a machine to watch something to entertain yourself. It's quite ridiculous to expect that my copy of Bob the Builder Live will still work from childhood. For a long time before streaming, they were the future of watching your favourite shows all the way at home. TUGS, being created by the producers of one of the kings of home video, Thomas the Tank Engine, has made itself present on many VHS releases over the years, from the English Castle Vision VHS releases to Takara's releases, and also, what the heck, Finland's VHS releases as well. There's quite a lot to talk about when it comes to TUGS home media, especially the ones by Castle Vision, who were the main distributors of the show. So today, on SonicWalle, despite me no longer doing regular analytical videos, I'll make an exception today and deep dive into the world of TUGS home media. Of course, this video's information mainly comes from the TUGS Wiki and the History of TUGS Google document. All links to these are in the description. I hope you all check them out at the end of the video. Also, please note that this video will not be covering the Thai VCD release, as that's still surrounded in a lot of mystery, nor the DVDs released by TUGS the Exhibition, which, by the way, I already made videos on both of them. If you want my opinion on those, please check out these videos after this one. With all the boring stuff out of the way, let's begin. The two program tapes. In 1988, TUGS first debuted on the home media via two VHS tapes. One being for Sunshine and Pirate, the other being for Munitions and Regatta, oddly referred to by its original title, 4th of July. These ones would stand out compared to later home media releases of the show, as when TUGS first aired in 1989, the episodes were at the length of 15 minutes. All 13 episodes were released in that format. However, this is where it gets interesting, as the plan was never intended to have these episodes run to 15 minutes. That was actually allegedly due to time slot problems. As we all know, TUGS episodes were originally planned to be 20 minutes in length, and were even filmed up to such. Some were even planned to be edited to 22 minutes in length, such as Warrior and High Winds. But as mentioned, it was scrapped due to these after-mentioned problems. So, it's interesting to say that Sunshine, Pirate, and Munitions Regatta are actually those uncut 20s. In fact, this explains why there's only 2 episodes per tape instead of the later 3. For starters, Sunshine contains 4 main deleted scenes: a cut 0 briefing scene, a deleted scene of Sally Seaplane having her fuel delivered to her by 10 Cents and Sunshine, being the only of 2 planned times of her speaking in the whole show, a deleted scene of Warrior encountering Izzy Gomez, and is the real reason why the Star Tugs even know of the Duchess is coming early, and finally, a brief scene of 10 Cents meeting up with Hercules with Lily Lightship on his way to find Sunshine. Now, the lingering question to all these changes is, why did they make some unnecessary changes to the episodes when cutting them down? Well, actually the answer is pretty much well known at this point, but for those who don't know, in 1988, funds were running low during the filming of TUGS, therefore 4 episodes were rushed onto home media in the UK around November of 1988. This was done prior to the time slot issues, forcing the episodes to be cut down. This explains why the episodes are indeed their 20-minute versions. Overall, these VHS releases of the show remain an excellent time capsule of that point of the show's production, and show off what could have been at that runtime. In fact, this isn't even remotely the end of talking about these 20-minute releases. But, more on that later. The 3 program tapes. After Sunshine Pirate and Munitions Regatta were released, another VHS tape was released on March 22nd, 1989, nearly a couple weeks before the show's premiere, that being of Trapped, Ghosts and High Winds. This would end up being the TUGS tape with the most releases, well, sort of. Interestingly, even though this tape predates the show's premiere, all video releases starting with this one now contain the 15-minute versions, with no differences from their TV airings. This would also be mysteriously TUGS' only VHS release in 1989, and the last in the 1980s overall, as the last two tapes would be released in 1990, that being High Tide, Warrior, Big Freeze, and Quarantine, Jinxed, Upriver VHS releases. Again, none of these contain any differences from the televised cuts, which is strange given that this would have been the perfect chance for Clearwater Features to develop the finalized 20s for home media only. But likely due to budget reasons, they only went through with the 15s. Unfortunately, this marks the end of any new TUGS episodes being released on home media in the UK. However, that doesn't necessarily mean they've released them only once. Re-releases. Very surprisingly, a decent amount of TUGS VHS re-releases in the UK. Some are more interesting than others. First of all is kind of a boring yet still somewhat interesting look at TUGS VHS labels, as for some reason, almost every TUGS tape from the UK contains an alternate label. For example, there are two known prints of the Sunshine Pirate tape, that what I'll be calling the logo tape, and the other what I'll be calling the text tape. The logo tape features an elaborate label featuring the TUGS logo, the Castle Vision logo, and the name of the tape itself, all tied up with the copyright date of 1988, followed by the copyright warning on the bottom. The top of the logo tape also features white text, which is definitely much easier to read than it having no colour whatsoever. Meanwhile, the so-called text label features a typed out title for TUGS, as well as the title of the tape itself, with no mention of Castle Vision, although there is mention of Castle Communications being on the tape, and the only copyright warning on the bottom being the only other interesting content on the label. If I had to guess, this is likely a later, more cheaper edition of the tape, likely produced to ease up costs or something. Personally, I don't know why they would ditch the previous design, but if anyone has any guesses like I do, let me know down below in the comments section. Anyways, while Sunshine Pirate released in the UK with only one case design, the same cannot be said about Munitions Regatta. Not only the label change as well, but there were four different releases of the tape itself. The first was the original 1988 release by Castle Vision, which is consistent in style when compared to the other TUGS video releases at the time. Then in the 1992 re-release of the tape, it was given a completely different one-off style when compared to any other TUGS video releases from the time. The TUGS logo is in a bubbly red font, and the back cover is also completely different, albeit the spine pictures were also repurposed on this release for the back cover. Interestingly, the infamous line from the producers of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends is completely removed from this video release, which was likely an attempt to sell it to an older audience, as the infamous producers of line likely swayed older children, TUGS' target audience at the time, from watching the show. Then in 1996, it was re-released again in a yellow case with the Playbox title on it, which would end up being the latest re-release of the episode on home media. More on Playbox in a minute. Interestingly, that's not even the end of it with Munitions and 4th of July. In fact, did you know some versions of the original 1988 re-release had an alternate title card for Regatta that renames it as 4th of July? Yup. In some releases, which the wiki claims to be around some 1990 print editions of the tapes, Regatta's title card was revamped to read 4th July, likely in a way to make it more consistent with the tape's name. Interestingly, the footage used in the background is repurposed from earlier in the intro, which is footage from Sunshine. Likely they imply they didn't have access to the raw footage, as the original footage from the title card sequence is actually from a deleted scene from Ghost, which likely required the editors to source out the rushes in order to get it consistent, which was likely out of reach for them. Tying with Munitions Regatta is Trapped, Ghosts and High Winds. This tape has 3 known UK releases. The first is, of course, the plain original 1989 release, followed by quite possibly the most interesting release of them all, Pocket Money Video, released in 1995. This release is extremely fascinating, namely because it was released by a different company, that being called Well, Pocket Money Video, which was a division of Polygram Video. They released VHS tapes containing their slogan, "An hour or more of magical fun," which they did not lie, as this tape contains 4 fan favourite TUGS episodes on it. Again, don't let the 4th episode fool you, this is just a re-release of the Chat VHS tape. So why is this interesting, you might ask? Well, the 4th bonus episode included on this tape is none other than Regatta, specifically the 20-minute version of the episode, and also referred to as 4th of July once again. Yep, not even the 15-minute version. This immediately raises a question. Why that version of the episode? Wouldn't the 15-minute version equal out to a solid 60 minutes? Well, my theory is that this release was likely exclusively authorized by Castle Communications, also known as Castle Vision. For starters, they owned half of TUGS' copyright back in the day, the other half being owned by Robert Cardona. Second, likely the only master of Regatta that Castle Vision had was likely only the 20-minute version. Thus, Pocket Money Video would likely only ended up having the 20-minute cut on hand, and therefore explains why this was used on this release, being the public's only exposure to the 2 simultaneous worlds of TUGS runtimes. Oh, sorry about going off track a little bit. What is next? Oh, this is a perfect segue to the Playbox releases. The Playbox re-releases. Possibly the most interesting series of releases of TUGS in the UK were the Playbox releases. In 1996, 3 TUGS videotapes were re-released under the Playbox range. This was a sub-series done by what I presume to be Castle Vision, as a form to re-release the TUGS episodes on the home media. These include the Trapped, Jinxed, and Munitions tapes, with none of them having any differences within their content, other than the VHS labels and cover of course. What's interesting about these is that they were the very last pieces of TUGS home media releases ever, post-dating the finished VHS releases by a year, of course not counting Salty's Lighthouse or the supposed Thai VCD release. These releases don't go farther than just being normal re-releases of the show, but it's oddly interesting given that TUGS was already way out of relevance at that point. I suppose Castle Vision wanted to make a whole lot more money from the show itself. As cool and interesting as Playbox seems, again, it isn't too crazy. Just notable for being the very last pieces of TUGS home media ever released. But we are not even close to being done yet. While we have tackled all the UK releases, what about the other regions as well, who are infamously called the world? I'm sorry I had to do this as a low reference. The Australian releases. Sometime in 1990, Castle Vision re-released every single TUGS volume in my home country, Australia. These Australian releases boast almost no changes between it and the UK versions, barring the opening ad which removes mention of the mature titles. In fact, Sunshine and Munitions tapes still use their 20-minute versions. Fun fact, similar to the UK, these Castle Vision releases predated the show's appearance on TV, and in fact, much like the UK, the TV airings of Sunshine, Pirate, Regatta and Munitions were the 15-minute versions. Allegedly, the sound on the Australian VHS releases are even worse than the UK versions, although not many rips of the Australian tapes have surfaced publicly or online, so I can't 100% verify this claim at all. Although definitely the least interesting of the TUGS VHS releases so far, I can't say it's bad either way. So with that being said, let's move to Finland, shall we? The Finnish releases. Now, for disclaimer, I already talked about my opinion on TUGS' official Finnish dub, so if you want to find out my opinion on this dub of the show, I suggest you check out my international TUGS dubs video, which by the way, the same rules apply to the Japanese dub. This video is about the video releases, not the dubs themselves. In 1995, eSpace Video European released TUGS over in Finland, which was dubbed by the dubbing studio, again sorry for my butchered pronunciation, Oi PPV Voice AB. These releases are interesting as they seem to be a combination of the TV versions and the Castlevision VHS tapes. Well, mainly the first 2 volumes, which straight up are paralleling the box art from their English counterparts. Interestingly, the Jinx tape would go for its own completely different style. At this point, you might usually suspect that Sunshine and Munitions tapes use the original 20-minute versions for dubbing over. Except, nope. This is the only time that the 15-minute cuts of Sunshine and Pirate were released on home media. Although, as I'll get into later, Munitions and Regatta's 15s were indeed released on home media in Japan. What's even more interesting is that, since these episodes are now the TV cuts, that means a 3rd episode is included on both. Trapped is included on Sunshine, and Warrior is included on Munitions, leaving only 4 episodes completely unreleased in Finland: High Tide, Ghost, High Winds, and Big Freeze. Other than that, these VHS releases remain pretty much nothing to write home about, other than their stark differences over their English releases. Which, speaking of which, the Japanese releases. Today's last stop with the wonderful world for the original TUGS series' home media releases is the Japanese ones. In 1992, rental VHS tapes of the entire series were released on the home media. These contain/include 3 episodes on them. Again, the first 2 releases, being Sunshine, Pirate, Munitions, and Regatta, are kind of akin to the English tapes. But interestingly, the later releases get more original over time. A commonly shared fact about these tapes is that they were usually placed in front of stores in sunlight, leading to many of these tapes to come out sun-faded over time, which explains why the front pictures look a little bit washed out online. A common quirk about these VHS releases is most notably that Sunshine and Pirate, for some reason, use their extended 20-minute cuts, rather than their 15-minute versions, which isn't really usually out of the blue until you realise that Munitions and Regatta only use their 15s in Japan. What's even stranger is that, allegedly, 15-minute dubs of Sunshine and Pirate did in fact release in Japan, but only aired on TV, likely making them very rare and lost to time. It is definitely a very odd way of releasing the show in the land of the rising sun. Anyhow, fans in Japan thankfully didn't have to wait too long to own their favourite episodes on home media, as later that same year, individual episode tapes were released for home use. Yes, you heard me right. You can own an individual tape of only your favourite TUGS episode included, which must have been really cool back in the day. What's also interesting is that Japan apparently positions Upriver as the 13th episode of TUGS, and vice versa for Big Freeze. For us, this is reflected on their VHS releases. Overall, these are wonderful additions to the TUGS home media branch, and are definitely interesting when looking back at them. But, you think we are done yet? Nope. How can I forget about the Video Buddy Salty's Lighthouse tapes? Hooray? The Video Buddy releases. At last, we've reached the last category of definite TUGS home media. In 1999, Sony Wonder would release 3 Salty's Lighthouse tapes under their interactive Video Buddy line, containing 2 episodes each. Alongside the episodes, they contain interactive segments and music videos. The interactive segments for Salty's Lighthouse notably feature the TUGS themselves, which is the reason why I wanted to include it in this video, showing us more of those wrong-looking versions of our favourite characters, to put it lightly. In fact, the more screenshots I've been showing, the more wrong it gets. Yeah, these aren't particularly great on the eyes, but again, it is also interesting. Despite their cursed designs, I got nothing else to say, other than how it's always fitting how we always seem to end on Salty's Lighthouse. How funny. And that, my friends, is the TUGS home media analysis. Similar to my merchandise analysis, I had lots of fun producing this video through and through, and hopefully you did as well when watching this video. Credits to assets used in this video will be linked down below. So with that all being said, this is SonicWalle, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye!